Welcome to Solar Insiders, a podcast reporting on the people, technologies and policies shaping the world's biggest energy source. Presented by Sophie Vorath, the editor of Renew Economy and One Step Off the Grid, and Rachel Williamson, senior reporter at Renew Economy. Solar Insiders is proudly brought to you by Pylon, the essential solar design tool to grow your solar business with quick and effortless proposals that will impress your customers. And Goodwe, the global solar inverter and energy storage company behind the all-in-one ESA battery system, who are proud to work with Australian cricketer and Goodwe ambassador Alex Carey.
Hello and welcome to Solar Insiders. My name is Sophie Vorath and I am the editor of Renew Economy. And joining me today is our lead reporter, Rachel Williamson. Rachel, how are you?
I am very well, Soph. How are you?
Quite warm. We're having another little mini heat wave here in Melbourne, such that they are.
I'm watching my one broccoli plant over the course of the day. Its leaves go from this to sad broccoli. And then at the end of the day, it sort of pops back up.
Happy broccoli.
Yeah.
How far off harvest are you?
I don't know. This is a broccoli we got from daycare. I'm amazed it survived. So
okay.
We'll just wait and see.
Usher it through the summer, maybe. My water tank has run dry for the first time in 17 years that we've had it. Which is quite something. Quite the drought here.
Yeah.
So praying for rain with the cool change, and that's enough weather from us.
It's your weather report from Renew Economy.
My water tank's run dry.
Moving on to the interviews.
Consumer energy. So this week's interview was another really fascinating chat. This time with Sahand Karimi, who is the founder and CEO of OptiGrid, which is this fascinating company that spun out of a research project where I think it was one person sort of specializing in in futures markets and stuff, and the other in battery optimization, which small part of the energy market these days. So Sahand is a sort of an expert in all things battery optimization, ranging from the very small to the very big. They've done some really interesting projects, including fitting the very small Hepburn wind farm here in Victoria with a battery because it was having a few issues. It's only a two turbine affair, but it was still having times where it would have to be curtailed. So yes, OptiGrid came in and helped them with that, and that's been a great success. It's also worked with Acacia Energy to gather together some behind-the-meter resources in CNI, which is another interesting project. But it's also involved in a lot of front-of-meter sub-5 megawatt batteries, which is a really interesting area and / controversial because these are what we often call neighbourhood batteries or community batteries, but as so many people have pointed out, there's often not very much that's very community about them. They're quite often owned by distribution network companies or at the very least through some sort of a waiver agreement, while we all work out how these are going to work and what the best way is for them. So yes, that's a lot of what we chat about with Sahand, and what we might do is jump straight into that interview, and then we can come back and discuss the matters of the week after that, Rachel. So let's hear from Sahand Karimi from OptiGrid. Sahand Karimi, welcome to Solar Insiders.
Thanks, Sophie. Thanks for having me.
Now, I've spoken to you before, but not on this podcast, and I'm very excited to have you here. And what I would love for you to share with us to start with is the origin story of your company, OptiGrid, because it has a really interesting background.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe actually it might make sense to maybe start a bit about my own background and how that maybe led to the creation of OptiGrid. So I'm personally a power system engineer by training, but I've been a researcher for about 10 years, doing research on different topics of power systems, electricity markets, developing mathematical optimization models for solving some issue in the grid. We started doing research at the University of Adelaide about 7 years ago on two topics, battery optimization and electricity price forecasting in the NEM, specifically focused in the NEM. Actually, my co-founder did his PhD on that topic, on the developing new types of machine learning models for forecasting electricity prices. I did my PhD on developing new battery operation and trading optimization models for hybrid assets or standalone assets. And I think it was in 2023 when we began working closer together, because actually we found that our research was very complementary, began working together. I also had worked in AIMO, so I had a good understanding of the details of the asset operations in the NEM and the little details that actually sometimes can make a big difference. So we created an accurate backtesting simulation system and started testing our algorithms. And there was a point in time where we saw actually what we developed performed quite good in terms of the capture value for batteries in the NEM. And that was the point in time where we started talking with the people in the industry and show them the results, show them the models. And there were in some cases where they asked if we had a product, and we didn't. It was just some models in our laptop. So we spun out of university about 2 years ago and raised capital to create this commercial entity, OptiGrid, to essentially commercialize the research we did for many years at the university. And and since then, basically, we've created the company, built a very good team, now about 14 people, built the product. It's now live on a few batteries in the NEM, including hybrid batteries and standalone batteries.
Yeah. Would be hard to sort of find a more sort of on the pulse couple of research streams there that, there's been this real learning curve with batteries. I think, they initially came onto the grid when you think, which seems like so long ago, when you think back to the original big battery in South Australia. And we really thought then of batteries as being this big sort of reservoir, almost like a water dam, where we would store excess energy when there was too much of it, and then release it into the grid when we needed it. And at best maybe smooth out some of those peaks. But really, batteries have revealed themselves to have many, many tricks, haven't they? And we're still really learning. Like it's really interesting to see. I know that one of the projects you did was with the small wind farm in Victoria, the Hepburn wind project. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Because that was really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, on your point about the complexity, I mean, I always mention, because I've been working on optimizing assets in the power grids for many years, I always mention that batteries are the most complex compared to the coal, gas, wind, and solar farms for many reasons. But about the Hepburn project, actually. So Hepburn Community Wind Farm has been operating for now, I think, about 10 years. And they had 2 wind turbines that have been generating power for that community. And the problem they faced, I guess, in recent years was partly the negative prices that actually reduced the profitability of the wind farm. And the other thing was the curtailment of the wind, essentially the economic curtailment that happens when the market prices are too negative. They're lower than the LGC prices, and it doesn't make sense to generate electricity. So to deal with those issues, they did basically a business case for adding a battery to the site. Adding a battery to a wind farm is not probably as common as solar farms. So we actually, at that part, we helped them also to some extent, helping with the business case, testing different scenarios. They also get some other extra help, and actually could create a strong business case for adding a 2 megawatt battery to their 4 megawatt wind. And and they did that. So they added, and we are now operating that asset. So operating wind plus battery is a bit more complex than just operating battery itself. But I guess that's, in a way, where there are complex things, that's where we shine, essentially.
Yeah, and finding, I guess, getting some experience for a lot of other parts of the grid where you can operate. And to that end, we talk a lot about household batteries. We talk a lot about huge batteries, big batteries that are just getting bigger and bigger and longer duration. But what we don't talk so much about is this missing middle that is sometimes called in the commercial industrial sector, and so probably batteries that are around about the size of the Hepburn battery, and the important role that they could play. And that's been something that you guys have been looking at a lot more, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we basically created OptiGrid, and basically where we did research on was focused initially on utility scale scheduled battery projects. But when we started building the optimization engine, the price forecast engine, we actually found that there is a high level of demand also in what we call mid-scale or sub 5 megawatt, just below 5 megawatt batteries. These are the batteries that are often installed actually front of the meter, so they're not co-located with the load. They can be co-located with generation, such as wind, such as solar, but they are connected to the distribution network, medium voltage of the distribution network, which means they're actually closer to the load than utility scale projects are, which is very good in the sense that they can also alleviate some of the demand and the load on the distribution network and transmission network when there's a peak demand. So in a way, we developed our product specifically for them initially, and we have now a few sub 5 megawatt battery projects that are live. The interesting thing with them is that they're following the same exact objective that utility scale battery projects do. So they still need to bid in the FCAS markets. They still need to charge at the times that the prices are low or negative and renewable generation is high, and then discharge at the times when electricity needs the power most, basically when the electricity prices are high. So that's been in a way one of our focuses.
Yeah. So these are what we sometimes call community batteries, and what
absolutely
there's been that big push by the federal Labor. One of their very early policies when they first were elected was to have this big community battery rollout, because the feeling was then this is an easy way for us to get storage onto the grid and make it work for consumers. But it's interesting because it hasn't. There's been quite a bit of debate about that, about whether it does. Like, what is better for consumers? Is it better for consumers to have their own battery? Is it better if we install it, as you were saying, in front of the meter in these distribution networks? So what's your experience of that? How does it work for consumers in that sense, having those batteries there?
Yeah. So as OptiGrid, as the company, we haven't specifically focused on the residential battery side of things, but obviously as energy consumers, we all have kind of that exposure to the business case on that side and how, let's say, subsidies can help with that. What we found in this scale, in the mid-scale below 5 megawatt level batteries, that the business cases are so interesting that the private investors are now investing in these batteries. So they don't actually need any subsidies, any incentives from the government, whether federal or state governments, to build these projects. They're being built just because of the fact that the business case makes sense. And the good thing about them is that they are the buffers in the grid, so they can charge from the extra solar, extra wind we have at the times that sun is shining, wind is blowing, and then dispatch the battery at the times when power grid needs the most. So they're essentially helping with managing that volatility and that high level of demand in the power grid, and they're helping reduce overall the volatility of the market and extreme price events, which ultimately helps reduce the energy costs for consumers.
That's right, which everyone is watching with an eagle eye. And we have seen that, that's been a real theme, that we've seen some volatility come out of the market. It's looking a bit more volatile this month, I think. But there has been that first real sign that some of the storage that's coming in and together with more and more renewables, and markets sort of being more clever and well run, is that we are finally seeing some prices come down. But you mentioned that the business case for these batteries is really good, which is great to hear. Who are your customers when you're working on these smaller scale batteries?
Yeah, so there are some now independent power producers, or some people call them battery developers, operators, that are building these batteries because they found that actually the lead time for developing a sub 5 megawatt battery project is much shorter than utility scale project. Basically, they can add that battery capacity, that storage capacity to the grid much faster and before the retirement of some of the coal plants that are upcoming, and also electricity retailers because they have their own retail book, they have their own consumers, and they need to have physical generation assets to, in a way, hedge and protect their customer book. So those are the two main segments that we found there.
Yeah. And there was, I think, another one of the controversies around these community batteries and neighborhood batteries was also how many networks were kind of getting in on the game. And it's one of those funny things that it's sometimes hard to see whether it's a bit of a hangover from the past design of the market that there's this ring fencing. We don't want networks straying outside of their area of current regulation. But they will argue, well, we know the best places on our grid to put these things and we can do it quickly and we can then make it count more, and it basically reduces costs spent elsewhere on the network and maintenance and that kind of thing. Do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that's where do you sort of stand on that part of the argument? I know it's a bit political.
Yeah. So to be honest, I am a power system engineer, so I always look at different kind of questions, topics from like an engineering viewpoint. So as you mentioned, over the past 6 months compared to the previous 6 months, the volatility, the extreme price events in the market, in the wholesale market has decreased, which is, I think, a big part thanks to the high level of storage capacity we added. But what at least we've seen in the distribution level side of things is that the networks are not, there's a lot more value we can unlock from batteries with using them for network support services at the distribution level. So I think that's an untapped potential for batteries that haven't been tapped into. How we can do that actually is a very hard question to answer. So looking at the DSOs across other countries, we can see different models. And I think in Australia, different DNSPs are now testing different approaches. So some have decided to, let's say, basically do a trial with some retailers. Some have decided to create new types of connection agreements that are more flexible for batteries to pay less for the connection fee but in return be more flexible with respect to their dispatch to help the network. So at this stage, I think we are probably at the trial and error stage with different DNSPs in the country, and I think at some point most of them will find probably the same method that would work. But I think right now they're just trying to find what's the best way to unlock that value from the batteries, which I guess on a high level should be there, but is not easy to do when we get into the details.
And on the again on the sort of financial side, I'm not sure whether you're capable of answering this question, but there's so where does the cost of a sort of sub 5 megawatt battery stand in relation to the cost of a home battery and a large scale battery? And I know that as a second part to that question, costs have been coming down in the battery world quite significantly, especially in the utility scale. Are we seeing that also in the sub 5 megawatt?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we are seeing that across all segments, from residential to utility scale. In terms of the cost, the normalized cost, which we use often in our business cases, so utility scale projects would certainly be cheaper than sub 5 megawatt projects, but there are two things into that. Firstly, there are different ways that you can make the deployment of sub 5 megawatt batteries more efficient that actually would save you some cost, but still the per megawatt cost might still be higher than utility scale. But the other aspect is that lead time that I mentioned. So sometimes in some regions, going to the market 2 years earlier would mean you would be able to capture some market volatility from like a battery investor perspective. that you wouldn't capture if you want to go through the path of developing a utility scale battery project. And with respect to the residential batteries, they're definitely cheaper than the residential, probably on a normalized cost level. Residential batteries, just because of the fact that they're relatively small, they're more expensive. Well, that's before the government subsidy, but yeah, if we include that, the calculations would change a bit.
And you've got and correct me if I'm wrong here, at least one of your projects is with a pure community group. Were you involved in the Fitzroy battery?
We haven't been involved with, so we are working with Acacia Energy, and Acacia Energy has been
that's what I'm
involved with
thinking.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, with that project, no, but we haven't been involved directly on that project.
Okay. Because I'm just wondering too about there was some concern that it's very difficult if you're not, say, a distributor or a retailer or an independent energy producer, even with a bigger asset base, to develop a battery of that size, because I think the intention was, well, we can do this and there can be community batteries and a community can invest, but it hasn't necessarily panned out that way. Is something like what you guys do, going to make that a better proposition for people and more likely to be able to be done?
I think so. So to some, there are 2 points about that. So firstly, what we do essentially is that we've developed our own proprietary price forecasting optimization models and can work with batteries anything beyond commercial industrial level. So we have now batteries in our portfolio that are 100 kilowatts, so same size as the Yarra Energy Foundation battery, up to utility scale projects. But with respect to that specific project, I think one of the challenges they had, and they published annual reports on their learnings about it, was the quality of the optimization. So I think definitely taking a high quality optimizer to that level of battery can help with the business case, because that can improve the revenue up to even 2 times in some cases. So that can really change, basically move the needle in that scenario. But the other thing that I would also mention with that is that with any battery project development that happens, there's a lot of learnings that happen. So developing one project is probably not very cost effective. Just again, looking from first principles, it's not very cost effective. But if, let's say, there is a group that's specifically focusing on developing community projects and they're doing many of them, actually, then that might become much more cost effective, because there's a lot of learnings that is gonna happen through those processes. And I think it's the great thing actually about the Yarra Energy Foundation is that they're sharing all those learnings publicly, which I think many other community groups have used.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And there's no sort of shortage of smaller projects, like small solar farms and community solar farms which don't have batteries and could add them in the future as well, which obviously, if they were optimized, would again not only create more value but from that actual existing project, but create a whole lot of other opportunities for these community groups.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, you passed a milestone recently of the amount of storage that you are working with. Is that correct? I think was it 10 megawatts?
100.
100 megawatts. Just 10 times that. So
yeah.
That's fantastic.
Thank you very much.
What is the makeup of that? What's the bulk of that stuff? Is it front of meter, behind the meter, big, small?
The bulk of that is front of the meter project. So front of the meter, just under 5 megawatt projects is the bulk of it. But we also have commercial industrial batteries, actually more than 10 different batteries in our portfolio. But the bulk of that 100 megawatt is because of is that just below 5 megawatt battery projects.
Yep. Gosh, that's a lot to have under management for 14 people. And what have been the biggest learnings for you, I guess? What has really surprised you, and where are you seeing, I guess, potential come out that perhaps you hadn't expected?
Well, obviously there are a lot of learnings that have happened over the past 2 years since we spun out of university and created OptiGrid. But probably one of the more interesting things, at least to me personally, was on the value proposition, or like why, I guess, customers have chosen us in some scenarios. So I guess the hypothesis when we spun out of uni was that the performance of the value capture for batteries is very important. We can capture more value, so they should go with us. But actually, soon we realized that's not it. So actually, you need to be able to firstly articulate that, give the confidence and clarity to the, in a way, the battery developers, operators, community groups that want to install the battery and then use your software. So actually, we found that one of the main reasons that in many cases people have decided to use our software over like other softwares that are out there was the fact that we were very clear and transparent about our limitations, about our capabilities, about our performance, and that really helped them even in the business case development. So in some cases, as I mentioned, we even helped in that stage, putting together different assumptions and helping build a business case for them to install the battery, which is, I guess, ultimately our vision, that hopefully by improving the performance of the batteries in capturing more value from the market, from the network, they actually, the business cases would be more interesting. We can build more batteries, and that's going to be really, I guess, helpful for firming up the renewables and ultimately going through the transition and retiring the coal plants.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mentioned to you earlier before we started recording that I've been listening to the results from Origin Energy, and it seems like even or especially these big gentailers are continuing to be surprised by what these batteries can do and where they're delivering savings and more efficiencies across their portfolio. And Origin mentioned that they've not had to use their gas peakers as much in small peaking events and use the battery instead. We're talking Araring now and Supernova coming online too. And that has saved them ultimately in maintenance costs for these gas plants, which is really interesting. And it goes to show that, you know, they're by no means saying that they're ready to give up their peakers. That's certainly not the message just yet. But just to say that these batteries have been so flexible and been able to fill these gaps that aren't necessarily that big and but need to be filled is really, really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I guess that, I mean, 10 years ago, well, it's less than 10 years since we installed our first big battery in Australia, but I guess that was the main value proposition when big batteries entered the power grid, because we've been using gas peakers, coal power plants, and other basically fossil fuel power plants for many, many years. But then batteries came in, and there were a lot of questions about their impact on the power grid in terms of the voltage impact, the services that they can provide. And one thing that has been mentioned by many people is how flexible and how agile these assets are and how much they can help in different countries. So in different countries, basically the power grids have different needs. But one similar pattern we've seen in different countries is that because batteries are very flexible, they can actually provide those ancillary services in some cases, or those extra rare needs that some power grids have. And in this case, in the NEM, because we have a 5-minute dispatch and settlement in the market, the prices can go to market price gap in just 5 minutes and then come back down to the normal prices. And it's almost impossible for a gas peaker to capture that. It just doesn't make financial sense. But it's very easy for batteries to ramp up just for 5 minutes and then ramp down once the, I guess, power grid need is resolved.
Yeah, it's almost crazy to think how we got by without them now, isn't it? Yeah. But and do you see more wind farms being a bit more like solar now, that we see all these solar projects now that are all solar hybrid? You don't really see many projects that are pure play solar anymore. Do you think that's something that will happen with wind farms as well in the future?
Well, it might. We are now seeing actually a few wind plus battery projects in pipelines. I mean, in terms of in utility scale level, probably the business case for wind farms still makes sense to some extent, because for solar farms we are now seeing actually for a standalone solar farm the business case is no longer there. There are no, I mean, there are not that many buyers of the power purchase agreements for solar standalone solar farms. So basically developers now need, they have to now develop hybrid projects. On the wind side of things, it's still not at that level, but actually we might get to that point. So we are, I mean, I guess we are seeing some early signs with the projects that are in the pipeline that adding a battery has helped the business case of the wind farm, because ultimately if you can connect two assets behind the same connection point and you can utilize both assets, that increase the capacity factor of the connection point and you're sharing more hardware and it's just more efficient.
Is that what you did with Hepburn?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you have a little bit of experience in that area. That
Yeah.
might be coming to you.
Hopefully.
And back to CNI, the CNI sector and industrial sector too. It's interesting because when you look at there's a really interesting segment of the renewables industry in Australia that is around all of the mining hubs in Australia and the Pilbara and parts of South Australia, where these mining groups are basically trying to wean off diesel, wean off gas in many cases, and switch to renewables and battery. And often in those situations, you see the batteries don't necessarily have long capacity. It's all about being there to firm and to switch from one to the other and that kind of thing. Is that what the future looks like for a lot of industrial loads? I mean, is CNI going to be more about that kind of battery than having huge amounts of storage, or I suppose it's a case by case?
I think it's probably a case by case, and so we are actually seeing. So we've been talking a lot about the markets, and that's the, I guess, the exciting piece, at least for us. But now we are seeing battery storage, thanks to their, I guess, the drop in the cost, are being used a lot more off-grid. So for off-grid sites where there's no actually access to the power grid, traditionally diesel generators have been used, then solar farms, and now you're seeing actually batteries are filling the gaps a lot more. So in some cases, actually, you might not even need a big diesel generator. Basically, you just need one, when in some cases where there's a whole week without any solar. In terms of the ones that are connected to the power grid, that's actually the challenge in a way. Building the business case for each commercial industrial customer is quite different, because depending on their load, the consumption patterns, and how adding a battery would, for example, reduce their demand charge, the business case would change. And in some cases, if let's say there's a load that has to be on 24/7, then yes, having a battery would actually add a material benefit in terms of the fact that even if there's a blackout, the battery can keep the load running.
Yeah, it seems like there's a huge amount of work that needs to go into that sector that but could be really beneficial for so many businesses too.
Yeah. And something interesting at that level that we are also now seeing, even at the medium voltage level, like the distribution network medium voltage level, you are seeing that some DNSPs are now thinking about how they maybe adding batteries in some parts of the network can actually help avoid blackouts where there is, for example, a maintenance happening at the transformer between the medium voltage and high voltage. Then the battery can supply the customers in that area and avoid blackout.
Yeah, which I think sounds great. All of these solutions that are not traditional grid solutions are really coming to the rescue in some areas.
Yeah.
And finally, on the subject of virtual power plants, obviously, when we talk about that, it's largely to do with residential solar and storage systems, and there's been a big push as part of the federal home battery rebate to get households to join VPPs. And that's all about optimisation, right? That's all about saying, well, we've got all this amazing solar capacity out there on households, and now people are adding batteries, so we'll have solar stored in batteries. How can we make this work for everyone? How can we make sure it doesn't go to waste? How can we make sure it doesn't cause problems that were unforeseen when we were first very excited about rooftop solar? But it's a really tough nut to crack, as we've written a lot about on Renew Economy, getting consumers to trust retailers, trust the aggregation, third-party aggregators to sort of reach in and take control of their assets is no small task. And what's interesting about you guys is that you're sort of looking at it from a more the next level up at this commercial and industrial level. And again, it's a really overlooked part of that virtual power plant mix, because you have to think it would be an easier sell to businesses than it is to households, and you also have to think it's a bigger asset than obviously there's a huge amount of solar if you can manage to coordinate that. But talk us through what's sort of happening on that level for you guys, and where you see that going.
Yeah, absolutely. So VPPs and I guess is the term that is being used a lot with residential batteries. But I guess if we look at the definition of virtual power plants, aggregating CNI batteries and then bidding all of them into the electricity market, making it available even in the named dispatch engine, where AMO runs the dispatch engine and determines how much generators should generate, is in a way what we enable for that level of batteries. Whether I guess the value that they provide is similar to residential, that's a bit I guess that's a big question, because for residential batteries, what we found often is that consumers are after self-consuming the stored energy in the battery rather than trying necessarily to trade. There are some energy nerds like me which would actually love to do that. Love to do energy trading with their home battery, but I guess with most of the people in the country, they probably would like to use their battery just to don't pay any electricity bill and you self-consume their solar rooftop generation. With the CNI, it's a bit different because it's a bigger battery. So there are some days that actually there's not much load on site. So, and just for the business case to make sense, given the value of the battery, they should be able to trade in the market, and that's what we enable.
Yeah, and are businesses into that kind of thing? You know, do you find that you have to sell it, or are people already asking for this kind of product and keen to be involved?
Yeah, so well, it depends. In some cases, they have even run RFPs for procuring battery optimization, which is interesting. But to be very honest, we don't directly work with businesses ourselves. We work through our partners such as Acacia Energy, which we mentioned before. They basically are the ones that do the EPC and installation for them, and our role there is to help them optimize the operation and trading of the asset and basically capture value from it. But we don't get involved in the basically the installation and deployment and the sales pitch to the customer.
You just have to make it work.
Yeah, we have to.
You have to do what it says on the box.
Exactly, we have to make it work, which sometimes is the harder task.
Yes, I imagine so, because presumably these people don't want to hear about it really after they've made that commitment and said yes, let's do it. They want to be able to just go, that's fine, and they want to just look at their bill or whatever at the end of each period and go, oh, look at that, you know, we made this and we saved that. So yes,
yeah, absolutely, and that's quite different to our utility scale battery projects, where actually the traders and operators would like to know all the details of the operation rather than trying to be hands off. So actually, that's been one of the other interesting things we found over the past 2 years, that depending on the segment, the battery operator owner would have very different preferences about how they want to operate the battery and how involved they want to be in terms of the performance and the value that the battery is capturing for them.
And the value stack for the batteries, the sub 5 megawatt batteries, is that changed dramatically since they first started being rolled out, or is it all still pretty similar?
I think if we go back to 3 years ago, contingency F-gas markets were very interesting back then. So contingency F-gas prices were high, but again, thanks to the deployment of a large amount of CNI, residential, and utility scale batteries over the past 3 years, the continuous F-gas prices have gone down quite significantly, so much that in some cases now actually there's no business case for adding an F-gas meter and install an F-gas controller. So there are now, so that aspect of the business case has changed significantly. But in terms of the energy market is quite deep in the NEM, so the business case is still there, and that's why you are seeing those projects being developed.
So in that sense, it's basically bidding into the market and jumping in when the spot prices are higher. And
exactly. So the focus has basically changed a bit from focusing on F-gas to energy only. And actually, I would say that's also the case for utility scale battery projects, because I mean, I guess you might remember that the first battery in Australia, Hornsdale Power Reserve, they could get their return on investment in a very short amount of time thanks to extremely high continuous F-gas prices. But they won't happen again because the F-gas markets are shallow and we have a large amount of batteries, which is good for consumers, but it also means that batteries need to find basically better solutions to capture that volatility in the energy market.
And I should explain that when we talk about F-gas, it's frequency control ancillary services, which is really like providing smoothing and that kind of thing. I'm really dumbing it down right now, but yeah.
That's right. Yeah, basically the reserve markets. The reserve markets.
Speaking of the return on investment, how long are you looking at roughly for a sub 5 megawatt battery these days?
So again, it depends on the project, and we don't get deeply involved in developing the business case, but the batteries now have a lifetime of 15 to 20 years, depending on the battery manufacturer. They can provide you with even a 20-year warranty. So the return on investments that I guess we are hearing across the industry ranges from 5 to 10 years, in where the business case is very good, can be closer to 5, but sometimes it can be longer. But if it is actually close to 5, then the project would get built and deployed quite fast.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I said before one last question, but I have one last question. This one's about the chemistries. Is it just lithium all the way still, or are there other chemistries coming out that are looking really attractive, like I guess sodium, iron, and others like that?
Yeah, there are definitely many other chemistries that are at the R&D level or at the trial level. So there are now redox flow batteries that some of them are looking very, very promising at this stage. But in terms of commercial, that, let's say, OptiGrid, for example, is optimizing, all of them are lithium based. So there's, at least in our portfolio, we don't have any redox flow or other technologies. And one of the things we also have seen with the lithium based batteries is that because the costs have gone so down, they now even make sense for longer duration projects such as 4-6 hour batteries. So we'll see how that side of things go, and I guess we definitely need longer duration batteries in the coming years, because right now what the market needs, what the power grid needs is 2 to 4 hour of duration. But in a few years time, once we have enough capacity at that level, what we would probably need is 8-12 hour batteries, and that's when probably new technologies can become more economical compared to lithium based batteries.
Yeah, it's very exciting. There's just never a shortage of anything going on in this industry, and yeah, batteries have definitely been very, very exciting. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Sahand. It's always good to hear from someone who's right there on cutting edge. And we'll have to touch base with you again, see how your portfolio is going in another 6 months' time or so. And yeah, all the best and talk again soon.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Great to chat.
G'day, Alex Carey here. The GoodWe ESA all-in-one home storage solution is here, and it's a game changer. It's packed with market-leading features, full home backup and 6-level battery protection. With up to 48 kilowatt hours in a single stack, the ESA is a breeze to install with no gateway needed. The GoodWe ESA series is available now and priced to cover the 2026 drop in the rebate. Visit goodwe.com.au for more information.
Trina Solar has been at the forefront of smart solar energy solutions, driving the transformation towards a net zero future with groundbreaking innovations since 1997. As a global leader in energy storage, Trina Storage has shipped more than 10 gigawatts worldwide and now brings their expertise to Australia to deliver flexible and high-quality energy storage solutions. Trina Solar, smart energy, powering a net zero future.
That was Sahand Karimi from OptiGrid. And yes, plenty of interesting topics there, and no doubt will cause a little bit of controversy perhaps. I think that subject of those smaller sized batteries, front of meter batteries, so the grid scale, grid connected but not grid scale or utility scale, is really interesting. And I think there's a lot still to be unpacked from them, but it looks like they are making quite a difference already, and there's a lot of potential there. And still potential for communities to develop them and for that to be done. Especially when we have smarty pantsers like Sahand working on the job. Very, very interesting man. Now, Rachel, you went on a very interesting excursion last week.
I did. I went on a field trip. Left
way out
my
west.
house. So I went up to the Pilbara to mainly see Fortescue's new battery electric trains, these enormous locomotives. It's got two. It is not replacing its entire fleet with these things. It's still got to figure out what it's going to do with the other 68 or 70 locomotives. It has 4 years to do that. But they think that they're going to be able to do it. So, yeah. But one of the most interesting parts of this trip, I thought, for a Solar Insiders audience at least, is we did a drive-by of the North Star Junction solar farm. And we didn't stop. We just drove past it. It's over there. And I was looking at it. And it's like, there are bushes growing up over the panels, like not far over, maybe just so on. And there are, spinifex and all sorts of things growing underneath. And this is when, who was it? One of the fellows on the bus said, we didn't clear the piece of land. We just put it on top of a work site. So we didn't flatten it. We didn't clear it. We just sort of scraped the vegetation off so people weren't tripping over it when they were putting the solar panels in. And now it's allowed to regrow underneath. And every so often a work party comes through and chops it off, make sure these plants aren't overshadowing the panels. But this is an idea that a small group of regenerative ecologists in Australia are urging the rest of Australia to do. Because they say, there's all these low growing plants like saltbush in South Australia and other things in the rest of Australia, which you can put underneath solar panels, and it reduces the temperature, the ambient temperature of the ground. So it makes the solar panels work
more
better.
Efficient. Yes.
Yep. And it also doesn't create this useless monoculture under the panels of just, grass that's 10 to 30 centimeters high at most. And so you get, you get insects, you get a bit of biodiversity, you may get some animals living in it. But all in all, it creates much more of a healthy area, a healthy biodiverse ecology than just having grass under these things. And so I was really surprised, actually. And I asked them, you were allowed to do this? And they said, yeah, the EPA was all for it. So yeah, it looks like in places where no one cares about bushfires, perhaps, middle of nowhere.
I guess the Pilbara is a little bit different in that respect. It's probably not so that thick shrubby bush that is so prone to bushfires.
That's true.
I'm sure they have their share of natural disasters and such, but I think it's a really interesting subject, and you've written a great story about it, which will be up on the Renew Economy site in the next couple of days. But it just is a really interesting idea that not only are these huge companies like Fortescue literally racing to meet very high and ambitious targets that,
Well, not these companies. I think it's just Fortescue.
Just Fortescue.
I don't know. There's much else happening.
That's true. That's true. This company, but they're trying to do it in a learning sense. So not just going, this is what we want to do. Here's all the old technology. Let's just do it. They're saying, well, let's do it in a way that suits the Pilbara. Let's do it in a way which is
cheaper.
Yes. And that's interesting because I did a story about a solar proposal that wants to use it's a bit similar to our it uses technology a little bit like Australia's 5B, where it's kind of prefabricated, that wave-like concertina style of installation. But the main point is that it uses far less concrete and steel for the installation. Rather, they use thinner iron rods and drive them into the earth as it is. So again, it's this idea of much lighter touch on the site. So there's not all the clearing and making sure the land's level. You can actually alter how deep you put the rods in, in line with the way the topography of the site. This project, which is for the Tumaru Solar and Battery Energy System, which is proposed for Queensland South Burnett region, and it wants to use this PEG system from Jurchen Technology, which is a German, probably Jurchen, German company. And it basically says that it, cuts the footprint by sort of 40%, and they don't have to use massive B-double trucks to transport it because it's so much lighter. It uses a far smaller area for the amount of generation, and it fits with the environment much better. So there's less clearing. Obviously, there still needs to be some clearing, and far less concrete. Concrete footing is pretty much not gone. So you use the concrete plates for bits and pieces, but mostly it's just rods and metal plates that are holding the panels in place. So it's a really interesting idea, and obviously it probably isn't ideal for every site. And if you want to do mixed use and have sheep grazing, then this is not the one. But it's just really important.
But perhaps if you were growing, just allowing the land, some low-lying plants to regenerate underneath.
Exactly. Rehabilitating land that's been farmed to within an inch of its life. It would be ideal. And I'm not sure how it goes on cost, but presumably that all makes sense for it to be being proposed. This is Australian Solar Enterprises, this company, which I haven't really heard much of, but the CEO was really quick in replying to my emails and really interesting.
I love those people.
I do too.
Yeah,
really great. And it's in the EPBC queue, so you can have a look there. It's really interesting, and they've actually used it. It's been used in a number of projects already in Australia. Yeah, really interesting. And I just think, good on Fortescue for doing this kind of thing and for testing out different. And there was something else you mentioned in that article that they've been testing, wasn't there? Or am I testing your brain right?
Everyone is focused on, will they or won't they get to real zero by 2030? And, that's a pretty huge feat. But then the question after that is, how do you run a mining company on just wind and solar? Like, how do you do that? Because as naysayers constantly are pointing out, sometimes the sun isn't shining, and sometimes the wind is not blowing. So what do you do when you have, say, a week of overcast days? And they have this vision of this technology, these layers of technology, which can control the batteries, control every battery, forecast the weather so they know what's coming, model that, and then use all of this information, including, say, who's ordering what, who's got what order in at the port right now, to say, okay, well, we're not going to have that much electricity this week, so maybe we idle an entire mine, or we idle parts of multiple mines, and then we focus on doing this this part of the work that we need done. And it will use this technology it will use basically these software layers to decide how to run the business, and basically how to change it, like fundamentally change how they operate in order to account for electrification and this new form of energy.
So build the business model around the intermittent energy rather than trying to build the energy around them. Yeah.
And this is something that we're all going to have to do, and like households already are doing. You run your appliances during the day, so it's something that at a household level, people who can do it are doing it.
Yeah.
But I couldn't find any evidence of anyone doing it at a very large scale. Like it's going to be very interesting to see how it works and what needs to be tweaked and what needs to be adjusted in order to effectively make everything, deliver the endpoints that they want, which is
a lot.
Yeah, a lot. 200 million tons of ore every year. A lot. And keep making a bunch of money.
Yes.
So can keep,
crucially.
Yeah.
Keep shareholders happy. Crucially.
Yeah.
Dividends.
Yeah. So that will be the interesting next step. How does this work? How is it being done? How can that be rolled out to other industries?
And you'd have to say that if more big corporations were putting as much effort and energy into this, then perhaps we would be making bigger advances. But they're not. Well, there's some stuff, and we can get to that later. Bringing it back now to more of a consumer angle, I just wanted to touch on the fact that last week the submissions closed for the AEMC's review into network design, and there's a whole bunch of things that they want to change. Pricing, essentially, electricity pricing review. And there's, a number of things they want to change. Some of them are very good reforms, but the one that everyone is talking about at the moment is a very contentious one, where they're talking about boosting the fixed price tariff for networks, which essentially means the amount that you pay every month, every quarter, every year, that doesn't change. It's just for access to the grid, and so there's no way you can minimize it. There's and it kind of doesn't matter how much you've invested in solar and batteries and that kind of thing, you're still going to pay it. So the idea of pushing that up and making it a bigger component of the network part of everyone's bill is, of course, quite controversial. So yeah, we've had the last of the submissions on that, and there's been a few really interesting ones. Last week we published some of the stuff from the Smart Energy Council and Solar Citizens, just saying that they think solar and battery households are going to be the biggest losers from this, and low-income households that don't use a lot of energy, but
low-income households and households that are not necessarily low-income but will be forced into some kind of hardship because their energy bills are ratcheted up.
So that's been been really interesting to follow, and we'll probably have a look at a few more this week, because there's a few different views around. Not everyone hates it, and there are, of course, arguments in favour of it, and the ANC makes its case as well, which is, it's not ridiculous. None of this is black and white. It's a million shades of grey. I think the big concern is just more that this is moving in the wrong direction, and it's kind of a bit of a complete backflip from saying we want people to be more conscious of how much energy they use and of investing in renewables and batteries, etc., etc. So it's like, well, don't tell everyone to do that, and then kind of remove
the incentive
or the reward. Yes, so that continues to bubble along. And I guess the other news from last week was that we have a new Mr. and Mrs. Opposition, Angus Taylor and Jane Hume. For energy, we really don't know what they're offering aside from nuclear seems to be back. Angus has never liked renewables, so I'm not sure how he'll feel about things now that he's, back in a position of power. And yes, all this talk of sensible policies and common sense and not ideological net zero policies, which is interesting because he seemed to sort of lumber Labor with this whole thing as if it's their idea to do net zero and the rest of the world is like, oh man, that's crazy. It's like, no, this is really a global science-backed initiative that there was a whole pact and there's been, a number of massive conferences and yeah. But sure, let's say it's an ideological Labor issue for sure. Yeah. So that's where we're at. It's a bit depressing at points, isn't it, Rach?
Yeah. Could someone just be in opposition and say something relevant?
Yes, or not just from the it's like they've got the decades old little box of cards of talking points and they just dust it off and go.
Well, I think they are dusting them off because didn't they say that they were doing they were going to be John Howard-esque?
Oh,
well, that was
that
the
one. But I mean, that's probably the assumption.
But that was the 2000s. It's quite a long time ago now. People were born in that decade.
Yes,
who are now adults and working,
who are now at the cutting edge of energy market reform. Yes, I just think be great if there was a bit of listening. It'd be great if there was a bit of less sort of let's just throw out everything that's been done and do it our way. But look, it's early days, and meanwhile, everything's going gangbusters. So let's see how this unfolds. On the consumer energy front, it's really neither here nor there. I think that it'd be a crazy political party to come out in opposition to solar and battery storage. But it hasn't stopped them from trying to criticize these policies at every turn. So it'll be interesting to see. All right, well that's it for this week. We will be back again next week. We're having a bit of a run of weekly episodes, and next week we might be talking a bit more about community engagement and how some of the smart and engaged and well-informed people are managing that side of our transition to renewables. Until then, have a great week. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to our sponsors, Pylon and Fronius, and thank you to you, Rachel, for joining me.
Always happy to be here. Hope you have a lovely rest of the day, Soph.
I'm sure too.
Solar Insiders was brought to you by GoodWe. Across residential and commercial installations, GoodWe's all-in-one ESA battery solutions support the solar industry with reliable, flexible energy storage. From rooftops to large projects, GoodWe is helping installers and businesses deliver smarter, clean energy outcomes. Discover more at goodwe.com.au. Solar Insiders is also brought to you by Pylon. Pylon provides easy-to-use solar design software for solar installers and retailers with pay-as-you-go pricing, no monthly costs and no lock-in contracts. Join Australia's top solar companies who trust Pylon to design high-resolution, CEC-ready solar proposals.